Welcome into this Tuesday edition Blue Sky Live here with you this morning. Chase Parham and pinch hitting from one Neil McCready, Michael Katz, Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal, as we are going to talk a good bit of Ole Miss NFL draft recap today. Mississippi State has fired their baseball coach, Chris Lemonis, out after quite the up and down tenure there in Starkville. See where they might go next and some other tidbits here as we move on through our day. Ole Miss and Austin Peay getting together tonight, 6:30 from Swayze Field. The Rebels and the Governors coming your way. Austin Peay 103 in the RPI. They hit the hell out of it though, averaging 9.7 runs per game at least. Relative to their competition, they hit the hell out of it. So we'll hit some of those topics and more coming up with you today. Yeah, we have a Dodgers fan in the house. You can heckle him, you can make fun of him, you can do whatever you would like there. But he's at least local. He is from California. So more on that in a minute. First, about blue sky locations throughout the state of Mississippi, up and down I-55, throughout North Mississippi as well. You can get Sweet Daddies for your catering, for your lunch special options at most of those blue sky stops. Two sides bread, 32-ounce drink on the lunch specials, ribs, pulled pork, sides, desserts, and plenty more with the catering. And neither one of us are there, but we have the Clark Ford studio every day. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Corey wants to be your car guy, wants to be your truck guy, and take care of special pricing for you. Always check out the rebelgrove.com message board to see what is coming with that. Again, Corey, we'll move you along wherever you are in your car buying process. And all guests, including Michael, coming on the Campbell Clinic hotline. Campbell Clinic in Oxford, Mississippi, your go-to stop, especially for pediatric orthopedic needs. So Campbell Clinic now in Oxford. No, Michael, you are not a Cowboys fan, too. You're actually from Southern California before they want to heckle you too much over there.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Rams fan of 8 years.
Lifelong Rams fan of 8 years.
Yeah, basically when they moved back.
You're
We had
finishing
nothing. We
your. Go ahead.
I was saying we didn't have pro football in LA when I was growing up there. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're finishing your fourth year, is that right, in Oxford now? Is that correct? 22,
yes,
23, 24, 25, which is probably a little startling to you when I say it out loud right there. But you covered Boise, Wyoming. We're going to talk Ole Miss, but I am curious about this because I don't know that I even asked you myself. What did you know about the South when you moved here? I mean, like, what was your experiences or your expectations when you took this gig?
um, I had never been anywhere more southern than like Austin, Texas. That's about as low as I had gotten in terms of the United States. Um, I didn't really have any expectations other than I wanted the gig, and I guess the best advice I got in grad school was that sometimes you just gotta take risks and go for it. And I said, I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna let the opportunity go by. Even if you know what, if I hate the place, I'll stay there for a year and I'll leave. But I ended up really liking it. So, but yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into other than it was gonna be really hot.
He did, in fact, live in Laramie. What are your what are your you're getting asked here by the stream? Daniel Cotto saying, did you live there? What are a couple the couple quick hits from your time there in Wyoming?
7,200 feet up in the air, so it is not for the faint of heart. Going upstairs sucks for the first couple weeks, but it's lovely. It's there's no air condition. No one has air conditioning there because it never gets that hot. No humidity. It's very different, very wilderness, kind of wild west. It's Josh Allen there because my timing is never good. I missed him by I think 2 years. But I know Josh a little bit. He's awesome. Um, Laramie's great. Boise's great. I've nothing but nothing but great things to say about those places.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Daniel in our stream a lot. He says he actually lives in Wyoming right now, so I was unaware that you were that you were up there in that. Also, you got I'm really proud for you, Michael. You get Chad Baker Mazzaro as a Trojan next year. I mean, that has to be really exciting and big deal. You're a UC, you're a USC alum. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, such a model human being that could be headed to SC there to help that program with its continued rebuild, if you will.
I saw that news yesterday, and I tweeted to a couple group chats with some profanity, and I was like, I'm a little angry right now because like we've all laughed about Chad Baker Mazara and his antics, and now he's my problem, and now I have to defend his honor.
I hear Michael in a lot of press boxes ridiculing, being frustrated by SC sports as they're not exactly the mecca and across the big sports these days. But let's jump into Ole Miss a little bit. Draft comes and goes. Ole Miss gets 8 players drafted. That is the most since the 7 round draft went into effect. So I guess most since the AFL NFL merger at that point. I think maybe second most. They had 9 back in the 60s or early 70s, something like that. And as we're watching it tick off, and we can hit on some individuals and what we think, but just in general, it's such a big draft for Ole Miss because they get that extra piece in what Lane Kiffin is building. You get the draft success now. It's not just about what's going on the field. It's not just going on in all these different ways, but now it's pointing to this process and going, not only come here and get drafted, but come here, improve your stock and get drafted. Trey Amos, more of a prospect coming out of Oxford than he was out of Tuscaloosa a year ago at Alabama. Warren Nolan, well documented. I mean, he ends up improving his stock where he was never going to fall below 17, goes even higher than that, and a lot of question marks with him coming out of College Station. Jackson Dart jumping into the first round after being a 3 year guy. All these different deals, and I guess what tangible impact do you feel like that has, Michael? Because it seems like that's just another hit in the portal situation for Ole Miss. It's, hey, come here. We're going to do this for you. We're going to create this situation for you. And it's one more positive, one more check mark as Lane Kiffin not only continues to try to reload every year, but is deeply entrenched in being one of these portal programs. And that's probably the biggest impact you can have is having draft success when doing so.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it really was sort of the last piece. I mean, you've had a lot of wins. You scored a lot of points. You had a great defense this year. I think in this era now, especially where making money is a really big part of this. Not only can you make money when you come to Ole Miss, but you can make it afterwards too. I mean, getting a first round quarterback and a first round defensive tackle. I mean, it's I think you're proving that you can go to Ole Miss and you can accomplish everything that you want if you are part of the process and you do what you need to do. I think it's huge. I mean, and I really think, I for better or worse, the Lane Kiffin story is always offense, right? It's always the quarterbacks and the receivers and all that stuff. But like, look at all of the defensive players that got drafted. And again, Walter and Trey and Princely and all these. Uh, it as a defender at Ole Miss now and get a lot of money at the next level and perform and get all those accolades and set yourself up really nicely. I think it's huge. This is it's obviously it's huge for the guys that got drafted. It's huge for the guys that are there now. But I think it's just really big for the program going forward because it's what does every major program in the country sell itself on? It's obviously it's success now, but it's setting you up for the NFL. Ole Miss can say they do that now. I think that's huge.
Yeah, Walter Nolan at Arizona, first round, 16th pick. Jackson Dart, obviously 25th pick to the Giants. Trey Harris, second round, 55th. Chargers, Amos, Commanders, second round, 61. Princely, Panthers, third round, 77. Watkins, 49ers, 138. Chris Paul, fifth round, 172nd. JJ Pegues, sixth round, 180. There, Jared Ivey, the main guy that we kind of thought would get drafted that didn't get picked when you look at sort of what would have been next, or maybe gotten Ole Miss to 9. And then they had a lot of undrafted free agent selections: Ulysses Bentley, Caden Davis, Nate Kalepo, Caden Prieskorn, John Saunders, Jerquan Scott, Brandon Turnage, Trey Washington, and Juice Wells. As well as Ivy, he's going to Seahawks camp, is where he is there. Neil saw him in Talladega of all places, and had that conversation over the weekend. They were both at a an event hosted by Monster where they were meeting Ricky Stenhouse. That not a conversation or a sentence that I thought I would have been making 6 months ago, but that's what happened. That's where it is. Out of those undrafted free agent guys, who do you give the best shot of making a roster? I mean, I guess Caden Davis maybe just the kicker, and if you can log on somewhere as a kicker, he obviously has a leg and all those kind of things. But outside of that, where do you sort of fall? I mean, you got to think maybe Priest Corner, Washington. Where you out there?
Yeah, I've said that like if Prescorn like gets a chance, he is going to be a guy that sticks around just because he has a skill set that like a lot of tight ends in football don't have right now, just in terms of he can block, he can catch, he can do all of the things that traditional tight ends do, but now a lot of teams are employing the guys who are just purely in the slots or they're just blockers. I think he's a guy that is going to be able to stick around. Trey Washington, I like that one too. I know you mentioned it, Jared Ivey. That was pretty stunning that he didn't get drafted. I know he didn't test great, and that's a really big part of this equation. But he's a football player. He's good. I feel like I feel like he's going to have a shot as well. But yeah, no, like you said, Caden Davis is the easy answer because we see kickers, undrafted kickers
Hmm.
all the time, having pretty good gigs. So I think he'll obviously he's got a leg. He's made some big kicks in his career. But I really like Prescorn, and I think assuming it's with the Lions, I think he fits what they do. I mean, he's kind of what is it, Laporta there now? He's like Laporta light in terms of like the skill set and those sorts of things. So I think there's a spot for guys like that for sure.
I did a really bad job hosting. I forgot to mention at the top of the show, we're going to have Michael Swain on from fog.net at the end of the program today. We're going to talk AJ Storr a good bit, the Kansas 6'7" wing that is headed to Ole Miss for his final season, South St. John's, Wisconsin. The Jayhawks and now Ole Miss in his 4 seasons. So again, Michael Swain covers Kansas basketball. We'll have him on there at the end. And when we do that, play the video. I'll come back and say goodbye. But just giving you a heads up, that is in podcast and video form as we move forward there. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably it. And you look at it, it's become almost kind of cliche, but a lot of things are cliche because they're true. If you're going to be a fifth, sixth, seventh round pick, there's a chance you're better off as an undrafted free agent because you get to pick a spot. You get to pick a location that fits you because there's a lot of places where Jared Ivey might not make sense, but maybe Seattle does, or a place where, even JJ Pegues, I know he got drafted, but like he makes sense in some places versus other just because of a lack of versatility. But you do one thing really, really well. You stick on special teams, depending on what your position is. So I think there are a couple of them on that list that make sense, and it's why Trey. Look, I think Trey has spent his entire Ole Miss career being underrated. He played a lot of plays. He did a lot of good things, as well as durability. I mean, he's a guy that you would check the snap counts every week, and he played almost every damn snap. I mean, he played over 80% of the snaps in almost every game he played over the last 3 or 4 years. It's a list where Ole Miss could really have a lot of guys that make rosters that get NFL playing time from this list, and it's just an inevitability. You also look back and go, God, it a missed opportunity because you see all these guys and their NFL impacts and what this season was, and it's why this season coming up critical to just sort of stay in the conversation. Not necessarily going to make the playoff, but not to fall back way off and make it where it's not a 1 year deal. And I'm not making some last dance reference, even though I think that was a kind of a foolhardy promotion over the course of the year. But at the same time, I do think it's putting some stuff on next year in that way. So it's the draft. It was really good for Ole Miss. How do you? We haven't talked about it much because, like I said, Neil's been out. You follow a lot of NFL. What is this fit for Jackson Dart, in your opinion? I mean, the Giants were not the Rams from a fit standpoint. He's not stuck in a situation like New Orleans might have been in with whatever they did. They ended up going with Tyler Shough at Louisville. But he's got a GM that's potentially on a hot seat. He's got a head coach that's potentially on a hot seat, depending on where it's moved forward. Um, doubt. I mean, he obviously is not getting the keys and having to produce minute one. But overall, it's a good fit for him mentally and just himself because I think he does have a demeanor that could fit in New York, and that's not everybody at all. I mean, Eli perfected it, but you've seen it flame out in a lot of ways too. I mean, I saw a post on the board that said New York is the perfect place for a winning quarterback and the worst place for a not winning quarterback, and that sums it up in one sentence very, very well. As far as opportunity based here, what do you see for Dart in New York?
I think it's a really good situation unless things start to go south early. And like you said, like this is an administration and a coaching staff that is trying to save its own skin. And the thing that is a little bit concerning is, yes, like right now, Jackson does not have to play. You've got Russell Wilson, you've got Jameis Winston, you've got these veterans set up so that he doesn't have to play. But we've seen that when things start to go bad and coaches want to save themselves, they will throw the young quarterback in to give a sense of hope, and to show that things are going to get better or that they can make things happen with that guy. And that's just not always the right thing. And so I think it's really important that Giants like get off to a good start without Jackson, because I think there's a chance that if things go really badly, they're going to throw him in there. And it doesn't seem like that's probably the best thing for him.
I look, I've been following Jameis Winston for a while. I mean, he was with my Saints. I've got a group text going where it's basically a Jameis Winston love fest because he's such a fun person and he just does all these crazy things and he's come a long way since his crab leg days back at Florida State. Dart mentions that I think he had a quote where he called him maybe a dream teammate. And look, Jameis has been through the ringer in every different way. And Jameis is the kind of guy that will take Dart under his wing in some way. I do think from a starting quarterback spot of having a veteran, but a veteran that's not so closed off, which does happen, that's not going to help, that sees you as competition. I think Jackson might be right. I mean, all things aside with all the negatives, Jameis Winston might be the perfect dude to shepherd you into the NFL right now.
I mean, what a quarterback room. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, and Tommy DeVito. I mean, man, it's the only one that might be more entertaining is probably is the Browns right now, because they've got 15 quarterbacks, and they've got an interesting situation going on there. But yeah, no, I agree. And I think Russell Wilson too is at a point in his career, and he always seems like he's been a pretty good teammate. I think he is going to be a guy that understands that, like, yeah, he wants the starting job, he wants to keep it, but he's not going to close himself off from the young guy who is clearly the future of the franchise.
How many quarterbacks you think the Browns put on their active roster? What's your guess on what that ends up looking like on opening weekend?
Oh man, I am gonna say it's gonna be. I think Joe Flacco's a starter, which is a wild Lord 2025. I feel like Kenny Pickett might be the one who doesn't make it. I don't know what they're gonna do with Kenny Pickett. I'm gonna say three. I don't know if this is the place to discuss it, but Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders in the same draft. That's a choice.
what, this really hasn't been dissected because everybody's been obsessed with Sanders' fall, with what it meant, the media consumption around that, and then the prank that came out, and that's where everybody's mind is focused instead of simply on the room and why they did it. And it is perfectly fitting that the movie Draft Day featured the Browns because we get the real life representation every time of a franchise that has no idea what they're doing. And there's a reason why some teams win and some don't, and the Browns are very much evidence of why they don't. But if you grab Gabriel in that spot, you've got a lot of problems. You have to like him to some extent, or you wouldn't take him. It makes no sense to otherwise. And then you move up and you maneuver to get Shador. Like, what is it that makes you go, the hell with it, and then grab him too? Like, what's even best case scenario? Are you just grabbing a couple and going, hey, they're both fairly cheap options. We'll just see what's what, and we'll cut one and move on with it. Give us two choices.
Just for me, like when they took Gabriel, and then they obviously they take Sanders, it's like, okay, well, you are probably saying that you didn't think of Gabriel as had starting potential. If you take Sanders, like obviously Sanders, I know there are a lot of ranging thoughts on him, but he is one of the guys who people thought could probably be a starting quarterback out of this draft group. Obviously had his free fall. But so if you take Gabriel the third round, that's a pretty high place on the surface to just be taking a guy who is automatically your backup quarterback. Fifth round is more of that region, but then when you take Sanders right after in the fifth round, it's did you really like Gabriel that much? Like clearly not. You clearly didn't see the potential in him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have taken Sanders, the guy who everybody's been talking about. I I don't know. I like Dylan Gabriel. I think he's a really, really good college quarterback. I think he's limited in some of the things that he can do at the next level. I think that was always sort of the knock on him. He was going to be a really good, probably NFL backup, maybe spot start, exceeds things. But to take him in the third round, which I thought was pretty rich to start, and then to take Sanders, sort of creating this cloud of what the hell are they doing? I don't know. And let's not forget Deshaun Watson's still on the roster, so there's just a lot of it's just a weird quarterback room. I I don't know how that thing is. I'm gonna say three active quarterbacks.
I'm going to take Nolan out. I'm going to take Dart out. What other Ole Miss draft pick, one or two, do you think has the most impact over the course of their NFL careers?
I think
Taking
Trey
out the
Harris is
first
gonna.
rounders.
I think Harris is gonna be a superstar, and I think that is an awesome situation for him with the Chargers. Obviously Justin Herbert's a really good player. They got Lad McConkey last year, and he's very, very different than the things that Trey Harris can do. If Trey stays healthy, I think he is going to be one of the bargains of the draft. I mean, we saw it this year. When he's healthy, he is as good as a wide receiver as there was in the country. I feel pretty confident he was going to set every record and probably win the Biletnikoff. If he stays, I know Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball. That's what they do. But he's had pretty good quarterbacks in his career, and Herbert is he's been a little bit up and down in his career at times. Just there's been a lot of coaching changes in his life, but he's a really, really good player. He's got a big arm. I think he's going to put Trey Harris in position uh, to do some really good things. I'd say the other one would probably be Trey Amos. I think he was underdrafted. I thought he was going to go early second. Um, um, I thought early second. I know he fell a little bit later. I think that is a starting corner in the NFL, and those aren't super easy to find these days. So I think the two Treys probably the easy answer.
And Neil wrote about it a little bit, whether Chris Paul made the right decision or the wrong decision. And we put everything about the matter of NIL versus salary, and that's where we go with everything just about money. But Chris Paul, the entire time he comes to Ole Miss to play on a better defense, to go to the NFL, and he gets picked in the fifth round. It wasn't a bad decision. You get a chance to go because if you're Chris Paul, and I'm repeating a little bit, but I feel the same thing that he wrote in 10 Thoughts. It's up rebelgrove.com. Is Chris Paul wasn't going to get faster. He wasn't going to get bigger. He wasn't going to do anything to change his measurables in any way. He stayed pretty healthy. It was the best case scenario for him to go do and chase an NFL career at this point. So I think criticism of him is kind of falling on deaf ears for me. I think Chris Paul did a good job. They're coming out and getting maximized with the fifth round pick there with that spot. Jordan Watkins maximizing by running a 4.3840. That is what contributed to him getting picked by the 49ers there in the fourth round. And then Princely, does he become an every down defensive end? I don't know. I know he can rush the passer. I know he can do a lot of things. I wouldn't have been shocked had somebody taken him higher. But
Mm-hmm.
then there's some parts of his game that are not necessarily consistent that make it into being a first round pick, an early second pick, something like that. But when you talk about who kind of has a ceiling that's pretty high, of the downstream draft guys, I do think I would go with Princely that he finds one more gear and becomes a player that plays the majority of snaps on an NFL team for a while.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guys who can protect the quarterback and guys who can get after the quarterback are some of the most important people in the NFL right now. If you can get after the quarterback, you will have a spot in the league. So I understand that maybe he doesn't do everything perfectly, but guys who can rush the passer are really, really important in the NFL right now. So I could have seen him going second round. I was surprised that he fell as far as he did, but this is a little bit off topic, but do you think it's concerning that we're talking about all these Ole Miss draft picks and not one of them is an offensive lineman? Is that a problem? Like, is that the next step to start getting guys like that drafted? Because this is a couple years in a row.
it's a really big year for Ole Miss on the field in that regard because what it is signaling is they have not done a great job with evaluating offensive linemen in general. I was trying to find the right word because there's a couple different ways to look at it. And then it's to me, it's showing you that that is one place that for the most part you need to do through the high school ranks. Like we can debate where high school recruiting is or isn't or what it should be, but offensive line, because of the continuity and the need for development and being in a system multiple years, I think that might be the one position on the field that you can't just go automatically portal heavy and go grab guys to put together because you don't know how they're going to work together. You're making them adapt to a system so fast, depending on when they're coming in from a portal standpoint. And then, frankly, especially in a rep share era, the good ones are going to stay where they are because they're going to get paid like crazy. So you're going to like the retention is going to be so much higher on offensive linemen. I mean, Ole Miss goes and gets Nate Kalepo. Um, they go get Baloo. I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time remembering the other Washington kid's name. Jerquan Scott, who did get picked up but was injured for a good bit of the season, played what we thought was somewhat out of position when he did come in for portions of the year. Yeah, I think it's more of a sign of it's a big year to see what you can get out of a Bryson Sanders. Like, is it time to get one of these high school kids who come in and develops from the high school ranks? Because I think Ole Miss has done it on the defensive line. Like, I think we're going to see a lot of
Yeah.
homegrown guys next year with Jamarius Brown and Cam Franklin and some of those dudes on the defensive side. But yes, I think it's maybe the one last hurdle when you're looking at what Lane is building, or at least shows proof of concept that goes from one year to the next, is the offensive line because he's found ways to make it work at times. But you go back through it and no, he has not developed any. They have not been able to turn any into some high level draft pick. And in the SEC, as you just said, rush the passer, protect the passer, and there's a lot of really good defensive linemen on the other side. They're kind of playing with WD-40 and duct tape a little bit, and I think that starts with the high school ranks. I think their move toward being a little more proficient with high school recruiting as they're doing now. They're being selective. They're never going to go grab 25 guys because they're too portal heavy for that. But I think being selective and what their evaluations look like on the offensive line at the high school level is whether or not they take the next step. Because I just don't, I'm sure there's some examples, but I don't think you can be counted on to go out and grab at least three starter offensive linemen every year out of the portal. I just don't think that works in today's college football.
Yeah, I think Patrick Kudus is probably going to be a guy who ends up being a pretty high draft pick if things go right. I think he's an exception, but yeah, I mean, what's the last Nick Broker? Is that the last guy? Seventh round a couple years ago. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, for all of the great things that they've done, and they've produced defensive linemen and now first round quarterback receivers. I think I think that's a if you look around at the other SEC programs, there's a lot coming out. I think I think that's going to be a big one. Again, like you said, Bryson Sanders. I think developing guys like that and having those guys turn out is going to be really big. One, getting them to stay, and then two, developing them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here back through the draft. I mean, last year Ole Miss only had three players drafted. They had Prince, Johnson, and Anthony. Nobody taken higher than the fifth round. From an offensive line standpoint, yes, you were exactly correct there. I'm still scanning back. Yeah, I mean, you're talking some linebackers, defensive backs, Wyatt, blah 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 blah. Yeah, this is crazy when you're going to look at what they have done. It's also just mentioning, I know everybody knows this, but first time they had a first rounder since 2016, and that was Evan Ingram at that point. Multiple time to have 2017, sorry, first time to have multiple guys since 2016. Yeah, I mean, offensive line, this is nuts. Rod Taylor in 2018, Javon Patterson in 2019, Royce Newman in 2021. I remember Royce at this point. Um, Nick Broker, 2023, seventh round. Those are the only offensive linemen since 2018 that have been drafted
Pretty
from an Ole Miss
That's
standpoint.
yeah. I think that's going to be a big part of this too.
And they're all seventh, six rounders. Like nobody's earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going back. I mean, Laramie is the last Ole Miss offensive lineman to be drafted in the fourth round or better.
Wow. That was 16?
That was 16.
Wow. Yeah,
He is now on his
that
third team. He's been a Dolphin, a Texan, and now a Commander.
yeah, I think that has to change, right, for Ole Miss. I think that's you can have the best quarterbacks in the world and you can have the best receivers in the world, but if you're not producing offensive linemen a little bit better than that, I think the ceiling's only so high.
I did. Sorry, you're right. I did forget Greg Little. So move it back a couple years. 2019 second round for Greg Little. Good. Thanks in the chat. We got one there. And Greg was the number one offensive lineman in the country at a high school. That was the Ole Miss recruiting class that had Shea Patterson and Greg Little in it in the top five. One of those hung around and played a little more for Ole Miss than the other. Darty asking, is Dart starting by the time the Rebs play at Madison Square Garden? Can only hope for a home game that weekend. I hope not for Jackson's development. I hope he is not starting by December the 6th. That would show that they
Ye-
are rushing him to save his job and show that they have a rookie quarterback and they can't fire people with a rookie quarterback. So
Yeah, if he is starting any time before the middle to end of December, I think things have gone very, very poorly. I think Brian Dable is actually. I know he's gotten some flack the last couple of years. I think he's actually like a really good quarterback developer. He did some really, really good things with Josh Allen in Buffalo, and make Daniel Jones a competent quarterback at one point, and that's a pretty big accomplishment. He got them to the playoffs. I think it was Dable's first year there when he was like the coach of
yeah.
the year or whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if Jackson is starting in early December, I think something has probably gone terribly wrong. I think the best case scenario. I know you can't really afford to like quote unquote red shirt guys anymore. But I think in a perfect he is not playing a ton this year, and he comes in 2026, 27 as the guy.
Switch gears a little bit. Mississippi State yesterday has fired Chris Lemonis, their head baseball coach. He was hired in 2019 and has a really odd tenure when you look at it all the way across, but also a tenure that's sort of expected in a way with the new era and what is possible from a year to year. He comes in 2019 from Indiana, very highly regarded. He learned a lot under Dan McDonnell, an Ole Miss connection there when he was at Louisville. Takes the Indiana gig, gets him into a regional 3 of the 4 years, and then was hired by Mississippi State. And right off the bat, 2019, 52 and 15. They go to the College World Series. They tie for the SEC West. 2020, COVID cancels the season, and then 2021, they weren't a fluke. I know everybody talks about the North Carolina State thing and how they were the hot team and they had to get past them, but Mississippi State went 50 and 18. They went 20 and 10 in the SEC, and they won the College World Series. There was no guarantee that NC State was going to get past Mississippi State. That was a good Bulldogs team. They win the national title, and then just as the NIL era hits, even in that little bit of 22, because 22 was a weird NIL transition year as it kind of got going a little bit. Um, they fall off the map. 9 and 21 and 22, 9 and 21 and 23. He was going to be fired last year with anything less than a postseason. There's no doubt about that. He does resurrect them into a 40-win season. They go 17 and 13 in the SEC. They get back into the NCAA tournament, and then they are sitting right now, as he was fired yesterday, 25 and 19 overall, 7 and 14 in the SEC. But hey, Michael, I've known a team to win a national title after being 7 and 14 in the SEC. So they may have given up on Lemonis a little too early here, but it's all jokes aside, playing into that. I've seen all this. I think Kendall said it was like, hey, he deserved the end of the year and all this different stuff. When you know you're going to fire somebody, you fire them because you don't believe in their ability to give you a direction moving forward in subsequent seasons. It's not about the season that you're currently in when you fire somebody. So, no, I don't blame Zach Selman at all for firing Lemonis yesterday because what could happen is he doesn't believe in his ability to recruit, to do all these different things moving forward, to put competent program teams in place with this program. And look, State's beaten Ole Miss a lot recently. That wouldn't be a crazy thing if Lemonis was still coaching and State won that series. They still have Missouri left. Missouri is 0-21 in the SEC as of right now. So they're not out of a postseason. And I think in some ways Selman was worried about them getting in by the skin of their teeth as a 3 seed and winning a couple games, and suddenly the boosters are like, oh my God. Instead, right here, Lemonis has no Q rating. They're 7-14. They're coming off a series loss, and it's this perfect time to sort of get him out of there and let the boosters be very positive, let the donors be very positive about the direction of the program and know it was the right time. I think it was, from a straight systematic search standpoint, probably the appropriate time to do that. I don't think anybody deserves anything in this era of the money and the NIL and stuff as it's going around. But, you know, he was able to put a group together that was a very old team last year. They get to 17-13, but it was a 1 year deal. And what this is, though, and I'll shut up in a second and let you talk, is that I think in college athletics, but specifically college baseball too, and college basketball, we're in such a 1 year rebuild every year of putting teams back together that when you're an AD, what you're actually saying is, I believe in him to be able to annually put a roster together, or I don't. And I don't think he has shown the ability to do that year over year over year. Because look, I think Mike Bianco is going to be in a similar situation next year. Is that Ole Miss is losing a ton of guys off this roster. I wrote a column on Monday about how good they did, how well they did with putting a group together for this year of older players. They had a plan. It's worked at this point as Ole Miss is 12-9. But for Mississippi State, they're looking for a coach because whether it be a lack of NIL and they need more and they think that a new coach might drum up more money and more support, or simply in the way that Lemonis went about his business, they do not think that he can reload and put rosters together perennially that is necessary for whatever the Bulldogs' expectations are in college baseball.
The first I saw that break yesterday afternoon, and the first thing I thought was, wow, that's weird timing. And then the second thing I thought was, they're afraid he might make a run,
Yes.
because then you can't fire. So I like you said, I understand it. If even if they make a run, it's pretty clear that they don't think that he was going to be the guy, regardless going forward. I'm curious, after things started off so well, and you alluded to it a little bit, and just in terms of the NIL era really getting going, why do you think he failed there? Because he's obviously a good coach. I mean, he's put together good teams everywhere. At Indiana, he obviously won the College World Series. I know that that team was not completely his put together. I know it was from the last staff. There were some remnants there, if I remember correctly. But what happened?
It's a loaded and a good question because yes, there's no doubt his best teams were not rosters that he had put together. In that old era, State had done a wonderful job of high school recruiting, finding guys in Mississippi, in South Tennessee, in West Alabama, understanding how to put rosters together. I mean, I don't remember the exact stat, but I think State went to at least a super regional with like four different coaches over a 4 year period or something because they had Canizero, they had Gary Henderson an interim year, they had Lemonis. I don't know. Again, maybe that wasn't the exact stat, but point was, no matter who the coach was, they were succeeding as a program on a national level. And I think State succumbed to a couple different things. I think they succumbed to a league that cares throughout it now, outside of Missouri. Forever it was tradition and ballpark and all these things. And look, State has some NIL money for baseball, and they've had a really good scholarship situation that sort of went under the radar. Everybody sort of put Mississippi State and Ole Miss in the old days in the same 11.7 grouping of they didn't have the lottery scholarships in state and they had the same problems. But Mississippi State's administration, and this went for the university as a whole, because reminder for everybody, if you are getting a lottery scholarship that you can get for being an athlete, that has to go to every member of the student body. There's no case by case where it only goes to athletes. And unlike Ole Miss, where their out of state enrollment was rocketing and all these different things, they didn't need to give help in those capacities. But state was trying to up their out of state enrollment. So they gave out of state tuition waivers to West Alabama, to Memphis, all the way up to Jackson, Tennessee. And that has been hotbeds for Mississippi State baseball. And it allowed them to put together rosters that were excellent over the course of those 3, 4 years that you're talking about. And I think that they were slow to understand NIL. They were slow to understand how much everybody else was spending on NIL. They were a little slow to make decisions, and they got caught up in tradition and facilities mattering more than everything else when it doesn't. I think they built this ballpark, and it's awesome. I mean, it is amazing in every way, but it doesn't win baseball games. Just like coach's salary does not win baseball games. They lost Will Coggin. I think that plays a role over the years. Like, there's a lot of things that have played into this that have put them where they are. But at the end of the day, it is simply amount of NIL, and it's using NIL in ways that make sense when you're evaluating how to put the roster together, because you can't go out and just get a bunch of prospects. They're either not going to show, they're going to leave you anyway, or they're not going to be ready in year one. I think for the schools that aren't Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M at the very top of the NIL food chain, it's going to be some version of what Ole Miss is doing, where you're getting established older players, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that have some proof of concept, and then you buy pitching, if you will, when you need it, that you can't develop. I think that's sort of the way that this game goes, and I just think State was kind of caught in the middle. They couldn't figure out what era they were in, and they never fully left the old era. They never fully invested into the new era. And then you look up, and they're 7-14, 1 year removed from a 9-21, and another year removed from another 9-21, around that 17-13. He did a good job with his job on the line last year of finding a
Mhm.
way to get a little bit of an older roster, but I don't think they thought that the way he then turned around to put this roster together, that was going to be sustainable moving forward. That's what it is. It's just, I mean, this isn't complicated. He's not a bad coach. He's a good coach. He's who I would have hired at Ole Miss had Ole Miss fired Mike after 2018. But I don't know that he necessarily understood, given Mississippi State's limitations in this new era, the right way to put a roster together moving forward. I think that's kind of where it was sitting.
Now, you know Mike as well as anybody. I'm curious. Are you surprised that he has navigated this new, at least this year, navigated this era as well as he has? He's pretty old school on a lot of.
Um, I don't think he did it first, because here, this is a compliment and a criticism at the same time. Mike is too loyal. And I mean that in a way of, even back in the old days with the 35-man rosters and all that stuff, he didn't want to release guys. He didn't want to put guys out in December that weren't going to find a place to play immediately and all these different things. He struggled with that in a lot of capacities. And I think that had to do with him hanging on to too many players in the beginning of this portal era. Ole Miss suffered and got into the situation they got into for a couple different reasons. It's not an excuse. Everybody loses pitchers, but they did lose their Friday night guy 2 years in a row between Elliott and Rivas. That plays a role into it. And then the other thing that happened was they were just slow to fully embrace where it was. You had Tennessee and Texas A&M and all these people jump out and go, wow, 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 we're spending, 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 spending. And Ole Miss just kind of didn't do it. They kind of sat there and said, no, they're getting that kind of money. Wow, let's do this. I thought they missed an opportunity because there was a group of people around the program, but they didn't fully go out and try to make 2022 get maximized from an NIL standpoint in baseball. They grabbed some guys and didn't realize where the money was going, but they didn't necessarily just fill up all the coffers when everybody was so pumped up right there after the title. And I think that knowing that you're on the ropes, knowing that you're losing in general. I mean, it's not about being fired. Mike is a competitive person. He wants to win. You heard just how competitive after Little Rock. He was fully in mode there after that one for Ole Miss. That was 2005. Mike coming out a little bit. Um, but you step back and go, okay, what am I doing wrong? And I think it's hard. Like, I give Mike a lot of credit for this, because we say it, and it's probably a little too flippant, because there's a lot of coaches out there that are in their mid to late 50s who don't change, that won't change, especially that have a ring, and they just go out in a blazing ball of fire in a negative way because they aren't able to do that. And whether it's because he knew he was out or whether he wasn't, look, Keith didn't mandate a certain change for Mike, because that's what you do as an AD. You either you hire the coach or you fire the coach, and you let him run the program as he sees fit. And look, do I think Mike Bianco hired a pitching coach a year too late? Yes, because I think they're still in development mode right here in the middle of the season, and that's causing a lot of these problems because you're implementing things that just aren't doable in the off season. But in saying that, he makes the change. He goes to Joel Mangrum. And they stepped back and looked at it really analytically and said, what wins in this league? And what wins is maturity and age and a clubhouse that makes sense. Look, they had a couple cancers in the clubhouse last year. That affected their win loss percentage. There's no doubt about that. It affected them. And I'm not even talking about Andrew Fisher or Liam Doyle. They had issues. And I think Mike, he's a survivor. I think he looked at it and said, okay, where have our good teams been? What's been the roster makeup? Okay, well, we don't have time to recruit those guys, pay those guys, and keep them. So how do we go out and just get them right now and put them together? And I think they've done a really good job of that. I think I mean, you've been around long enough for this. I think in the CEO role, and it's not just him winning versus losing, he's been lighter. He's been more joking around with this. He's just been in a better mood. And it's not simply them being 31 and 13 or whatever they are and 12 and 9. I think it's because he's putting less on himself. He's got a really good guy running his pitching staff. He's able to step back, look at the program as a whole, and he's probably just eating fewer Tums and Rolaids right now. And I think that the sign for this Ole Miss team is going to be not even how they finish, but how do they replicate this next year and what does it look like? Because you've got to replace a lot, and it doesn't even necessarily have to work. It has to make sense. Those are not the same thing. Like sports are sports; they're fickle. Who knows? But where Lemonis lost Selman's trust was that the roster didn't make sense. Mike next year has to make the roster make sense, even if they don't get back to a host or whatever it looks like next year.
It's interesting you brought up that he seemed lighter. He does seem less burdened. He does
Hmm.
seem a little bit more jovial. Yeah. I mean, obviously Mike's an intense guy, regardless of situation, and like you said, he wants to win. He's a competitor, but yeah, I've always imagined that he would be really good in a bigger CEO role, and it does seem to be working. At least as of right now, we'll see how it works in the years to come. But I think it's been good for him, and obviously Mangrum is he's been obviously Riley Maddox has talked about it. He's been not just a pitching coach, but he's been a shoulder to lean on for
Yeah.
mental stuff. I think it's been really good for Mike not to have to shoulder everything.
Kendall had his hot board up. So people asking, "What am I hearing?" I had been hearing Will Coggin for a while. If they end up the assistant route or they take a couple swing and misses. Look, Eric Backage is not going to Mississippi State. We can stop that. Tony Vitello is not going to Mississippi State. Even Kendall told a Mississippi State Twitter account yesterday to temper their expectations on the Vitello news. So we even got that yesterday out of KR. Um, Look, they're gonna see what the situation is with Mingione at Kentucky, former state guy. That makes sense. Look, you call Butch Thompson and see if he'll take the job. We can debate whether or not that Auburn or State is it. Or look, State is a better job than Auburn. There's no doubt about that. But we can debate: is it a good enough, better job? Is a better enough job to make that move inside the league, leave Auburn where you've at least shown that you can get to Omaha multiple times. Butch has done a phenomenal job there. I still think pound for pound, he's maybe the best coach in the league with what he has to deal with year over year inside that school. Um, so if I'm Spellman, I'm making Butch say no. They do seem like they want one of their own right now. That's why I think Will Coggin, if they don't end up hiring Mingione or Butch, it can end up there. But they're going to take a few swings. I'm reading here from Kendall. He says that Mingione's buyout is incredible. So he has the sentence: should Mingione leave for another job, the new school would be on the hook for the remainder of his contract. So in this
Mm.
case, that's around $6 million. State's not State's not doing a $6 million buyout for a baseball coach. So I don't see how that keeps him on the table here at this point. Yes, Butch is from Monroe County. He and I share that. We are from the same county. Um, Drew prediction: Chris Pollard is the next MSU coach. That's possible. I think Pollard makes a lot of sense for them. He's at Duke right now. He's done a good
Mm.
job. If you're going to pluck a sitting head coach that's not one of these known names, I'll also give you another one. And I don't think this happens. No, so they're also going to make Wes Johnson say no with Georgia, but I would assume Wes does say no. I don't know why in the world you would leave Georgia for Mississippi State right now, but I do think they're going to make him say no. Um, Brian O'Connor, Virginia, they're winning. His
Mm.
buyout's only $500,000, and I'm I don't always agree with a lot that Kendall says in coaching searches and hot boards. We actually disagree quite often. But he threw up O'Connor, and I think if there's some weird name out of left field, that might be it. Because in this ACC house settlement world we're in, where the money's so different in the SEC than everybody else that cares about college baseball, if you're gonna jump at any point, it might be the time to jump. I just feel like if you told me to go put one on the roulette wheel or just throw some 100 to 1, I think Brian O'Connor might be where I go with that. The star's fallen a little bit on Lane Burroughs, but they're at least going to kick some tires there at Louisiana Tech. He's done a really really good job. Rebel 41 asking, are they going to call Ostrander at Southern Miss? I have not heard that name at all, but he's one hell of a baseball coach, especially on the
Yep.
pitching side. I don't know what that looks like, but look, I think a guy like that is what State needs. I think, and it's what I did the last time I had to deal with a hot board for Ole Miss after 22, is you're not looking for a big name necessarily. You're looking for a guy who's won with just average resources. Because while yes, Mississippi State and Ole Miss are top 15 national jobs, they also were probably like 8th to 10th in the league, 11th in the
Yep.
league. And that's who you play. So yeah, once you get to the postseason, sure, go beat the other teams, but you've got to get in a good space by beating other SEC teams. And I think bringing in guys who haven't, like, I don't think Tim Corbin would be a good hire. Like, he's had all these resources at Vanderbilt all these years. Like, he's not the guy to turn around and then go, hey, we're going to go nickel and dime it and find ways to do this. Jackson asking about Dan Hefner at DBU. I love Dallas Baptist. For some reason, they're kind of a team I follow. They crack me up. He is very religious, and I respect that completely, but I do not think he's going to go to a place that does not have some sort of religious affiliation tied to them. It's kind of what I've
Wow.
heard over the years when it comes to Hefner there. Um, if State does not get a sitting head coach, every sign has pointed toward Will Coggin or Josh Elander at Tennessee. That is that Coggin is still where I would put my money. He's not as well liked by some people inside Mississippi State. He's going to have to kind of buy over a few people if he ends up a real candidate for the gig. But then I had somebody in college baseball tell me yesterday that Selman's reputation is not excellent, and that could be a problem with getting a sitting head coach. That from a baseball standpoint and what they think that he's been like to work for, that it's sort of permeated throughout the league that Selman is not perfect or great when it comes to bringing an attractive option there. So I don't know if that would play a role in anything. I mean, if you're like Skip Johnson at Oklahoma, do you jump ship inside the league to go to Mississippi State?
When is someone gonna fire the Cliff Godwin bullet?
He's turned them down before. Now, would he turn them down now? I don't know. Cliff, and I say this having known him for a long time, he really, 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 really wants to take East Carolina to the College World Series one time. And when I say really wants to, I mean a life goal beyond what you or I probably understand. I can't put, and I'm not even making fun. Like, that has been his complete life goal to take his alma mater to the College World Series for the first time since it began. He's had opportunities. He's been to super regionals. He's won game ones in super regionals. Winning at East Carolina, though, in 2025 is incredibly difficult. They are just so resource laden at this point in a negative way. It's really really hard. I think Cliff probably does have some crisis of faith right now. Hey, is it just time to find a better situation? But at that point, you're basically throwing your hands up and telling your alma mater you're not going to be able to win at the one sport you care about. And I think leaving Greenville and doing that would be very hard for him. And I don't think he would do it for Mississippi State. I just don't. This is going to sound stupid, but I mean, Carl Lafferty's probably Cliff Godwin's best friend. Like, I just don't even see him coaching against this Ole Miss staff. Like, I just don't from a personal level, and I don't think that's the group that he would hitch his wagon to take that gig. Because look, last time State came and they looked at him, they basically offered him the gig, offered him 7 figures, and John Cohen went and sat in his living room and they had a conversation and he turned it down. He said no. So I just don't think this would be the time for that. It wouldn't shock me if they pull in a sitting head coach, but I think people over this is for every school, every sport. We overestimate how likely that is to do. People just don't typically go steal somebody's coach inside the league. And I don't know that State is in the current situation between an administration and between where their program is right now to accomplish that. So no, I don't see that being the case. I still would put some money if I was betting on Coggin. I think Butch would have a decision, although I don't even think. And I'm looking at it here. Kendall didn't even put Butch on the list, so maybe he's hearing something I'm not hearing. I haven't really tried when it comes to that. And then a wild card, I'll give some credence here. If they decide we can't get any of the big names, but we have to hire a sitting head coach for NIL purposes, Skylar Meade at Troy. He's a 40-year-old. He's won a lot at Troy. Maybe. I think that would be one that actually would be not a bad hire, but I don't know if the fans would get behind that immediately. But that's kind of day one what I'm thinking. As opposed to a couple other articles I read where they said here's who I'd hire and then didn't name candidates. There are some candidates that I like there as as they move forward. Did you understand when you got here the level of college baseball love that you were walking into in the SEC? Are you muted? Can't hear you. Yeah, I'm not getting the level. Exit and come right back. Just log out. Click that link again. He'll come back in. We'll get him back. We just got a little bit of an internet deal. Not a big deal while he's doing that. Yeah, no, Cliff's chance was against Texas that one time. They just blew game three. That's exactly what happened. Um, I'm sure that one was incredibly difficult to get over for him at that point. There you go.
Let's try this.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you were making a great point, but I couldn't hear it, and you looked like very like. I was really excited for what you were saying. So, mate,
Oh,
can
you
you
couldn't hear
repeat?
me either.
No, I literally I
Oh,
just texted you. I said I lost audio. I
oh,
was
I did
I'm
not
not
see that. My bad.
I'm not a great lip reader. Um, but I'm sure
I
it was
was
a
asking you. I was more just rattling on with a ton of candidates and different things. But at the end, I asked you, was it a draw, or did you even realize kind of the level that the SEC was into baseball when you were walking into this beat to cover it?
so it's funny because nowhere I had ever been had college baseball.
Yeah,
Because Wyoming dropped their program in the 80s, I think it was. Boise State brought it back for like 4 games, and then COVID happened, and they never brought it back. That was a whole thing where they got rid of the wrestling program, brought back baseball, and now they don't have either of them. So I mean, I grew up watching the College World Series. I knew that teams like LSU and whatnot were in Arkansas, and I remember seeing Ole Miss, and I remember hearing the Elko stuff with the knee before I got here. I think I knew that SEC baseball was really big, but I don't think anything could have prepared me for like the full stadiums, and I guess again, I grew up. I'm a Pac-12 guy, right? So like Oregon State was the best team in the Pac-12 when I was growing up. Like that stadium holds like 4,000 people. Like it's tiny compared to a lot of these SEC stadiums. I think that's the thing that I was most struck by is just the size of the stadiums and the fact that they can fill them. I mean, man, there were some of those games against Arkansas, against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. Um, that were just absolutely packed. They were amazing crowds. I don't know if I expected like that part of it. I guess I never really thought of college baseball in that light. I just thought of the product itself and not the environments. I think that's when one of the really cool things is just to see how much it matters here. And college baseball doesn't matter everywhere. Listen, I'm USC grad. USC baseball does not matter that much to people at USC. It just doesn't. And that's why their stadium, I think, held like 3,000 people. And again, this is the winningest program titles wise. I know it was a long time ago, but in college baseball history, I think just the magnitude of its impact, in just in terms of crowds and how closely people follow it. I guess I never thought of it as being on the same level as a college basketball or college football at places. And at certain places, it's it's probably not king at a lot of places, um, but man, it's hard to get a seat. And I think that's the thing that's really struck me.
That it holds the emotional capability of fans the way it does, like that it impacts weeks
Yeah,
and days and has a football type mentality when it comes to how your team is doing and how it impacts the spring. That's a big deal.
absolutely. I never thought that like my Twitter feed would be littered with college baseball, like things like, right? Like I expect that from base or from football. I expect it from basketball. I don't think I expected that sort of emotional reaction from baseball, and I think that's part of what makes it really really cool is just how much people care about it.
So a couple quick news and notes, then we'll go to Michael Swain. Fog.net again covers Kansas. We talk about AJ Storr, and then we talk some about Kansas being, and this is loose, but linked to Ole Miss in a way of Ole Miss delayed all their stadium stuff and said we're going to pump all the money into NIL and we're going to go into the Grove Collective. And Kansas instead said, no, we're spending $750 million on a football stadium right now, with Big 12 money and having to do the house settlement. So I asked Michael a little bit about that as well. But that's coming up in a second. First couple things though, ACC looks like they're going to move from 20 to 18 conference games. They are doing that to try to increase the amount of non-con to get more teams in the NCAA tournament. So you're basically admitting out loud that our conference sucks
Our
downstream.
conference stinks. Yep.
Yeah, that's what you're actually saying there, is they had a really rough year on the hardwood. So they are probably moving from 20 to 18, potentially frees up more non-conference spots for SEC teams against ACC teams. And then Chris Beard turned down Texas A&M. He was offered 7.3 million to go coach the Aggies. Ended up at about 6 million. I think you had those details. Was it 6, Michael? Was that correct?
Yeah. First year six.
Okay, first year 6 for Chris at Ole Miss. Buzz taking a bit of a pay cut at Maryland, but it was time just to get out. I think both sides wanting out there. He's replacing Kevin Willard, and he has signed a deal that in year 1 is going to pay him 4.8 million in College Park there at Maryland. That is a $720,000 increase from what Willard was making last year at Maryland. So that's the money they're putting into it. I don't know if that's Scott Van Pelt money. I don't know what they're doing there with the Terrapins, but they have increased it a little bit, but still a definite pay cut from where Buzz was last year. So we'll jump into it now. Michael, appreciate the time today. I will close on my own right after this, but Michael Swain coming to you from Fog.net as we talk AJ Storr and Kansas basketball. Michael Swain, Fog.net, 24/7 Sports, now joining us here on the Campbell Clinic Hotline, Kansas, where AJ Storr last played basketball, but he's played basketball at a lot of places, 4 high schools, now 4 colleges as he wraps up at Ole Miss. Michael, thanks for giving us a little time. Mostly want to focus on a little basketball on AJ Storr. And let's start from the beginning, which the beginning with AJ is a strange place, but let's start with the Kansas beginning. He goes to St. John's, goes to Wisconsin, averages 16 points something while he's a Badger. You think, hey, you're getting this kind of player that's going to help KU. What was the anticipation on where he fit in? And then, frankly, what happened?
Yeah. Oh man, we go a lot of places with this.
Yeah.
So KU had a prior relationship with AJ Storr going back to his high school recruitment. They got him on campus for a visit. They ended up taking Grady Dick over him. Grady goes on to be a lottery pick, moves on, and obviously AJ's bounced around. And KU going into the offseason really wanted guys that could get downhill and score. Because if you had looked at the season prior, KU was very easy to guard. DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams were limited players. Hunter Dickinson was good. Kevin McCullough was good till he got hurt. And KU just really lacked any sort of dynamic scoring ability. And so you look at what AJ did at Wisconsin, and you're like, okay, like you can see where that's going to come from, right? He was able to get downhill. He's a good transition player. And traditionally, Bill Self, his teams have played relatively quickly. Like they've been teams that are not afraid to get up and down. They play slow at times, but generally he lets them go if they can go. And so you could see how that side of it would work. But KU also had the thought of, I think we're going to fix AJ Storr. When you look at what he did in his career, not a lot of rebounding, not a lot of guarding, Not a lot of really, I think, smart basketball plays. And I think their thought was, okay, hey, AJ can do the stuff he's really good at, right? He can get downhill. We'll let him do that. We'll let him score off the bounce. But at Kansas, he's gonna have this thought process that, hey, yeah, I got to rebound. I'm gonna buy in and do all this extra stuff that it takes to play for Bill Self.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't changed in 23 years. You got to guard, you got to rebound, and you got to play smart on offense. And the thought was that AJ was going to do this stuff. And it just didn't work. I think at some point in time, you look at basketball players, right? If you played 2 college seasons, you kind of are who you are. Guys don't change a lot after they've played 2 seasons. And I think that's probably a lesson KU's learned now, that that's not something they can expect. So yeah, it didn't work out. We could probably get into more reasons why, but generally for KU, the stuff that you thought he was going to do, get downhill, create off the bounce, he didn't do that. And then he quickly lost playing time because he wasn't doing the extra stuff that it takes to earn minutes in the rotation, whether it be rebounding, guarding, knowing your assignment, playing smart offensively, right? He wasn't doing that stuff. And so, his minutes really did go in the tank.
Yeah, he ends up averaging just shy of 16 for the season, 15.7 there for him at KU last year. And this is not me putting Kansas's relative struggles on AJ Storr, because that would be comical in some ways. But at the same time, how much of it was sort of what the expectation was for Kansas last year and what you thought the overall roster would look like and how Storr fit in? And I guess what percentage was Storr not working out one of the bullets that sort of affected Kansas in a way that was not traditional Kansas basketball under Bill Self last year?
I think there are a lot of things that went into that. I think,
Okay.
if you want to divvy up pie, like a blame, shoot, AJ probably gets maybe 20% of it.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't his fault. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
his
yeah.
fault. I think you can look at KU and say, did that evaluation fit? Probably not. Because again, you're asking a guy to change who he's been. And so now you're taking a square peg, trying to put it in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got 3-ish non-shooters on the floor, right? Hunter Dickinson shot better from 3 as the season went on. But he's a 7-footer. He's going to play in the paint. KJ Adams, your 4-man, can't shoot outside of 5 feet. Elbow jumpers occasionally, but he's not spacing the floor. And then your point guard is scared to shoot. So you're playing there with 3 guys who don't shoot. AJ was never really known as a 3-point flamethrower. So you really can't expect him to go out there and be your floor spacer. He's the guy that theoretically takes advantage of space. And then you go look at other things like Rylan Griffin coming in from Alabama, another guy where he had a marquee trait, shooting the basketball. Doesn't do a lot else outside of that. And so overall, you get into the situation where, KU has this portal class that's so hyped. And understandably so, right? If you look at the name value, you've got a starter from a Final Four team in Rylan Griffin. You've got a guy who was an all Big Ten player in AJ Storr.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the Summit League Player of the Year, a guy from Lawrence, and Zeke Mayo. And that's a pretty good threesome if you look at it on paper. But again, the pieces just didn't come together and fit. And so, with AJ, you look early in the season, he had his struggles, but then you look at some of the bigger games, he was really good against Duke in Las Vegas. He was pretty solid against North Carolina. And some of those bigger games, he was passable. But I think it's in those other games against, a Wilmington or someone like that where you just kind of sat there and said, what exactly is he doing? And I think as time goes on, right, you want to use those games, the bye games, right, as your chances to build momentum. And that just didn't really happen. And so when it came time for conference play, Bill Self, again, has been the same way for a long time. The season starts out, it's 10-man rotation. By the time you get to December, it's usually 9. Someone gets cut. Then January, someone gets cut. And by the time the NCAA tournament comes, you're at 7-8 guys. And so AJ kind of found himself on the outside looking in. It was an awful performance against Arizona State at home. Played 3 minutes. Came on, turned the ball over twice. 2 backdoor cuts he allowed. 2 backdoor cuts. He got yanked. Didn't play again in the second half. That was probably the rock bottom moment. And then from there, I think KU just was like, what can we get out of this kid? And let me say this too. I think some people might have some preconceived notions of AJ based on the fact that he's moved around. It's weird that that's going to be a thing now. Guys going to a new school every single year for 8 years. But the coaches liked AJ Storr, the human being. And they thought he was professional. He was never a problem in the locker room. He never complained, never went to Bill Self, saying, you got to play me more, or I'm going to sit out, or I'm going to do this. Like, he showed up to practice. Did he always practice well? No, definitely not. But he was always professional, worked hard, and it just didn't really work. And I think both sides would tell you it just didn't really work.
6'7" is going to give you a lot of size out on the wing. He looks the part. I mean, getting off the bus, you understand exactly what you're getting there. I guess, like you said, if you want to say, hey, he's going to make this huge transformation, then okay. And if he does that, then he's going to be all SEC, and Ole Miss is going to have a hell of a player. But assuming that it's mild to moderate or what he is, what do you sort of have to surround him with on the floor if you're Ole Miss? I mean, what does this five need to look like to be able to maximize Storr's capability out there?
Yeah, so I think so what are you going to say is AJ's biggest marketable trait? Well, I'd say it's probably his ability to get downhill, play in transition, and I would not have him in a role where you're asking him to create for others a lot, because he doesn't really do that. He is a guy that when he gets the ball, the shot's going up. And so you got to find ways to get him in positions where when he gets the ball, he can attack someone. He can have a good driving angle, or he's open in the corner from three. You don't want him being the guy that's bringing the ball up and having to create off a pick and roll. That's just not who he is. He's a guy who he catches it, can attack, close out, and get to the rim. And so theoretically, I think you want a good passing point guard, someone that can create for themselves. Theoretically, I think everyone in college basketball would like two guys that can shoot, right? Space the floor. And then I think just generally, you want a team that's athletic and that wants to get up and down. You don't want to be a team, I don't think, that is going to get a defensive rebound and like the point guard gets it and he says, hold up, let me walk across the floor and waste 8 seconds of time. I think you want a team that's going to try and get up and down, so where you can really use AJ's athleticism, to his benefit. Man, like the highlight of the year was actually a defensive play AJ made in transition when against Arkansas, he goes up and has a huge block at the end of the first half. Like, he's an athletic player, great size, good physicality. You've just got to be able to find ways to get him in positions where he can use that and not have to think, because it was a big issue for KU when they were trying to retrain, redevelop him. Bill Self had the 0.5 rule. In less than a second, in half a second ideally, you have to either, when you get the ball, shoot it, drive it, pass it. None of this catch the ball, okay, what's going on, okay, the defense is set. Really, can you think fast? And so I think that's kind of the next step for AJ is, can he continue to get better at that? Because if he does, I think Ole Miss is going to get a player that can go put up points. Will it contribute to high-level winning if AJ doesn't make other changes to his game? I'm not too sure, but I still think you can have a good basketball team that can win a lot of games with AJ as a piece. I just don't know if you want him to be the guy.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because you're bringing him in for upside, and Chris Beard is very similar to Bill Self in that way. You play defense, you hustle. I mean, Beard's entire MO in every way for coaching is defense first base when it comes to toughness and what this thing looks like. And it's where you mentioned that, and I look at Wisconsin and what they did with him, and he got downhill, he got to the line a lot, he hit a pretty good free throw percentage, and he was a double digit scoring machine at Wisconsin for that season. He has double digits in every game forward from November 20th, the entire year. He hit 5 threes against Nebraska in a game at one point, and it's the Big Ten. It's not like it's bad basketball. It's good basketball.
Oh.
Inside that league, it's a tough league as far as defense and physicality and different things. It's why I wanted to talk to you, because he's an enigma. You watch what happened at Kansas, and then you look at the year before and go, yeah, there's not a ton of rebounds. There's not a ton of assists, as you said. But from a banging around and getting there and scoring, he did provide that one element that Ole Miss is looking for at this point, because they lost so much. They got Malik Dia back. They had Klafke back. They have 2 freshmen. I know these names don't mean much to you, but then they were going out in the portal for a lot of different guys. They need AJ Storr to score the basketball. There's no doubt about that. They need him to put it in the rim this time.
Hey, and that is if that's what you need AJ Storr to do, he will gladly oblige you.
All the green light, huh, Michael?
Oh.
Like he's good with the green light. We're good.
Oh, it really is. And I don't want to say joke, but it was a running kind of thing that you're like in your head when you're watching these games. And if the first shot went in for AJ when he's coming off the bench. You knew as soon as he caught the ball, that ball's going up. He is shooting the basketball the next time he gets it. And I think that's the type, if you want him to be a guy that scores, and theoretically, let's say, Ole Miss has some other defensive players around him that maybe can mask some of those defensive issues that he has, or the rebounding issues. Man, like, yeah, you can unlock some of that scoring. It may not be the most efficient scoring in the world, but he can get you 12 to 16 points just based on his athleticism, and so I think that, again, you get back to kind of the roster construction, and I think you've got to find the right pieces, and I just don't think KU did that. Now it's a question of, were you building a roster around AJ Storr, or were you building a roster around Hunter Dickinson? And for Kansas, it was building a roster around Hunter Dickinson rather than one around AJ Storr. And so if Ole Miss is able to do it better, where they can assess what AJ does well, which is score the basketball and be an athlete, and take what he doesn't do well, which is rebound. And I think defensively, he's not the best scouting report defensive player. If you can find players that fit around him like that, I think you can unlock some of that stuff and mask some of those issues. Again, it just gets back to, I just don't think KU was the right fit. I don't think the roster was the right fit. And that just kind of happens sometimes nowadays.
How did the program, just the fan base, kind of handle the season that was at Kansas last year?
Kansas has not done a lot of losing under Bill Self. Like, it's genuinely so impressive what he's been able to do, where for 20 years, Kansas is basically a lock to be a 1 or a 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it genuinely is unprecedented. It's something that I think, as you get towards the end of Self's career at Kansas, which it is, Self says he's on the back 9. He's not whole 18 yet, but he's on the back 9. They've won a lot of games, and there have not been many seasons where you are having a record that is closer to 500 than it is 800 in the Big 12. And so I think fans did not blame AJ. I'll tell you that. I think there were some other dynamics in play. KU's had the same point guard, DeJuan Harris, or had the same point guard for a long time. And I think sometimes when you have the same player over the course of time and they're the same player for multiple years, you really grow to see where they lack. And that happened with Kansas, where DeJuan Harris, KU fans were so used to seeing Devontae Graham, Frank Mason, dynamic guards that could create their own shot, go crazy from 3, really be high-level players, to this guy that, on his best days is kind of like a poor man's Rajon Rondo. And I think his lack of shooting created this situation where fans, I think, kind of resented some aspects of his game. And I think the same thing for KJ Adams, having a 4-man that doesn't shoot, that doesn't rebound, and really does, I think, struggle offensively. Yeah, he's great defensively and he's tough. But I think some of those dynamics, I think, really were the guys that probably got a lot of the blame, where I don't think really AJ and Rylan and Zeke Mayo, I don't think those guys got a lot of the blame. I think a lot of it was directed towards some of those players that have been at Kansas for a while. Was that totally fair? I don't know. I'm not really too sure I'd agree with all of the blame being put on those guys, but it's what happened. And so I think the fan base, I think, quickly probably – they lost back-to-back games. They lost to Missouri and to Creighton in the same week. And I think that was the week when fans were like, oh boy, all right, it's the same thing over again. It's the same thing we saw the previous season. Whatever happens, happens, but this isn't going to be it. And so I think as a result, I think fans came to grips with the season not going the way they thought. And so AJ Storr, I don't think fans were too pissed off at him.
I wasn't implying that. Yeah, I don't think that was up there on the list. We're all dealing, when I say us, I mean media, schools, fans, everybody's dealing with the revenue sharing and the House settlement and all the things that are coming. And I mean this in a very relative nature to how good Kansas has been for so long. Are they as equipped in this NIL era in basketball to be as successful annually and perennially as previous in the old era? And then how is Kansas sort of balancing the football basketball needs? Because suddenly the football program is viable. It's a competent program. Lance has done a hell of a job there. What is that looking like on a basis of how to distribute the revenue to make sure you occupy where Kansas basketball has set in the stratosphere, but also make sure that football is taken care of and something that pays the bills like that potentially?
Yeah, man, this is a frequent topic on the message board right now.
Yeah, sure.
It really is because it's such a fascinating dynamic for KU. I think we could take a step back and say, okay, so KU last year had one of the most expensive rosters in college basketball.
Sure.
AJ Storr, Hunter Dickinson, two of the highest paid players in college basketball last year. They've had the money. They've had the money. And it has just come down to, I think, poor roster evaluations like we've talked about. And look, we're 2025 now. We're 3 years removed from KU winning a title. Like, it's not been all bad, right? Two back-to-back poor seasons like this, I think, can get people in the mindset that it's awful. KU's been bad. It's not been the best, maybe 7-8 year run, I'd say, but you put a title in there, and all of a sudden, a lot is forgiven. Now, the dynamic for basketball this offseason is a little different. KU's building a new football stadium. And that project is about $750 million. That's a lot of money. And a lot of that is coming from donors. And so that has been an issue. When you look at Kansas, and the Big 12 does not have the biggest media deal out there, right? Like the SEC and Big 10 do. So there's already a deficit there to get up to your kind of $20+ million of revenue sharing. And so KU is having to tab donors a lot right now. It's a lot. You've got a football team in Lance Leipold that is competitive, and last year had probably its most talented roster in a long time. Yeah, it didn't really go well, but again, best roster they've had at Kansas in a long time, and there were some very well-compensated players. And I just think at some point, if you're a place like Kansas, it's not, I think, one of these situations where, you can look at Kentucky and they're spending $20 million allegedly on their basketball program. Like, with everything that's going on around KU right now, that's just a hard thing to do because you're building a new football stadium. And damn, the football stadium looks nice. We got a tour of it last week. Like, it looks good. But again, it is taking, I think, some of the resources that could theoretically go towards a bigger NIL situation with basketball. And I think it's just impacting things a little bit. Now, also, KU's going to pay Darren Peterson a lot of money, multiple millions of dollars. And Flory Badunga, getting him back, costs more than $1 million, probably $1.5 million. And so if you're talking about a basketball budget around $10 million, which is what KU's projected to be at, well, you're talking right there, probably north of $4 million, $4.5 million for those two players. That's a lot. And so KU's having to try and figure out right now, how are they going to be able to kind of fill out the rest of the roster? And they've gotten some good players. I think KU's changed the way they're trying to do the portal, where they're going away from the AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, Zeke Mayo, right? They're going away from some of that name brand stuff and going more to who are guys that fit Bill Self, who are guys that guard, who are guys that rebound, who are guys that are tough, right? Going after that stuff. So for KU overall, it's such a fascinating situation because the football program needs money. It does, for NIL, for player retention, for the stadium. And basketball needs money for NIL, for its own team to have success. And Bill Self wants to have the best team possible. And so it's just created this dynamic where I don't envy Travis Goff right now and his staff, where they have to manage the donors and try and get enough money for their basketball coach, who's a Hall of Famer, who is getting towards the end and wants to win one more title. But then on the other hand, they've got a football coach that's trying to make this football program a consistent bowl team and maybe a team that can go and win the Big 12 one day. So it's just it's a crazy time. And so it's obviously great for Kansas because it's healthy. You want to have successful basketball and football programs. And so it's just kind of one of those situations where once I think this stadium gets finished in a year or two, I think then all of a sudden you'll be able to see some of the, I think, maybe flexing of the muscle in terms of the money for basketball that maybe isn't able to happen as much right now just because of what's going on around the athletic department.
Yeah, Ole Miss and Kansas are oddly tied together from the standpoint of what they did about facilities, because Ole Miss needed to update its football facility, its stadium. It's old. It needs a lot of work. It needs things. They had already put out renderings for what another expansion would look like. And essentially, with construction costs outside of the pandemic, and then with NIL and everything coming, they said, no, we need players. So we're going to dump everything into NIL. We're going to move everything to talent procurement and salaries and rev share and everything on that side. And we're going to halt everything that's not already done from a facility standpoint. They did a little bit of A little bit of small stuff to some Olympic sports. They built a new softball stadium because they had to and had already gotten there. They made a bunch of improvements to their football indoor practice facility and what that looks like. But as far as the actual stadium, everything is on hold. They're looking at some private public funding now. Maybe they get into that a little bit. Not straight private equity, but some partnerships, if you will.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that Kansas went ahead and said, no, the stadium was necessary. This is a huge deal. And now it is. It's like this huge 180. I get they're in different leagues and whatnot, but I've heard multiple people sort of tie them together on they took complete opposite approaches on how to manage this era and this money for over this 5 to 10 year period.
Yeah, and so I think KU's hope is that this new football stadium will help drive more revenue. And at the end of the day, right, that's what this whole game's about now. How can you maximize dollars? And so KU's old football stadium was a dump. I mean, we're talking troughs for years. Like it's
okay. Yeah.
It needed something bad. Like it's so hard to put into perspective how old and how bad it was. And so they needed this. And I think keeping Lance Leipold, this was going to be something that had to happen. And so for KU, it's about trying to manage all this. And I think the hope is that whenever this gets done, it's going to be more of a multi-purpose where you can have multiple types of events there, maybe concerts, maybe you can have soccer tournaments and stuff. So it's things where maybe you're able to squeeze more out of the orange there that is the stadium and get more of that revenue. Because again, the Big 12, this gap between the Power 2, the Big 10, the SEC, that gap's going to continue to grow, I think, in terms of the revenue as these new TV deals start to come in. And Brett Yormark, I think, has done a good job with the Big 12. But at the end of the day, there's a Power 2, there's a gap, and there's the ACC and the Big 12 and whatever the hell is left of the Pac-12. So, it's just you're fighting such an uphill battle that I think KU kind of had to do it. It's just one of those where nobody this day and age can predict that, we're going to have revenue sharing and, there's going to be a house settlement where there's roster limits and all this stuff. 18 months ago, when a lot of this stuff got put into motion in the fall of 2023, revenue sharing wasn't on the radar.
Right.
And so at that point, wheels are in motion. They've got, federal stuff they're able to get through grants, and we could bore people with all this talk and star bonds and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the new football stadium had to happen, and it's happening. It's going to help KU in the long run. But I think right now there's just a little bit of just growing pains as all this change happens at once.
Last thing, and I appreciate the time. And I think you might have answered this off camera before we got started, but does anyone at Kansas give two dams that Dan Fitzgerald is 35-10 and 15-6 in the Big 12 right now? You
know what? It's been really cool to see, actually, because the students have showed out for some baseball games. And there were some, I'm not sure if you've seen, but there were some viral clips of the whole student section going crazy for some home runs. This Kansas baseball team, I'm a one-man band here. And so for me, I'm very much stretched thin. I'm even all right, I need to start incorporating some more baseball coverage here as we get down the home stretch because of how well they're playing. And there is interest in it. They had their first sellout, I want to say a couple weeks ago. Consistently, They are getting fans to the ballpark. It's not the biggest ballpark, but they're getting fans to the ballpark, and it's a fun team to watch, man. They hit a lot of home runs. They are exciting. And so it is something where I think there is a lot. It's been a rough year between the football program having a down year, between the basketball program having a down year. All of a sudden to kind of finish the academic year with the baseball team having the run it is and just playing such a fun style of baseball. I think it's given everyone something to root for. And I think fans have really, really taken that head on.
You might not know the answer to this, but I'm just sort of curious. And you mentioned facility for baseball. Ole Miss, at least in the host conversation when it comes to a regional for baseball this year, I think they were 18 in the RPI this morning. They're 12-9 in the SEC. Will Kansas submit a bid to try to host a regional if they get into that range, or is the park not able to do that, in your opinion? I don't know anything about Kansas baseball, is why I asked that question.
I don't know for sure, and so I'm sure someone could get pissed at me if I say no and they're like yes, but I don't even know.
Your guess is no.
I don't know the capacity off the top of my head for the stadium, guys, but I don't think that's going to be happening.
Okay.
It'd be a big ask, and I'm not sure if the baseball facility, I think, could take that.
Okay, fair enough. So AJ Storr, over under 12.5
Ooh.
points a game for Ole Miss next season.
I'll say over. May not be the
Okay,
most
all right.
efficient, 13, 14 points, but he'll get them.
All right, sounds good. Michael, appreciate it. If we can help you out anyway, let us know, but I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for having
All right.
me on.